On July 22, 2018, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in a speech to members of the Iranian-American community, announced,
"The BBG is launching a new 24/7 Farsi-language TV channel. It will span not only television, but radio, digital, and social media format, so that the ordinary Iranians inside of Iran and around the globe can know that America stands with them."
In recent months, there has been a lot of negative coverage about VOA Persian. On January 17, 2018, the Wall Street Journal, in an editorial piece, wrote, "While Iranians are desperate for reliable circumvention technology, the BBG leadership has spent only $15 million of its $787 million 2017 budget on internet freedom and anti-censorship projects, and the agency is telling vendors it will take weeks to direct more funding to these projects. The place needs a thorough rethinking for the internet age." On January 12, 2018, Maryam Memar-Sadeghi, co-founder and co-director of Tabana e-learning institute for the Iranian civil society, and Akbar Atri, former Iranian student leader, wrote in an article in The Hill, "The outlet is poorly managed, with low morale among staff. If the Iranian people are to make a transition to democracy, they will need daily news and analysis from a VOA that is robust and encouraging." On July 22, 2018, Iranian-American scholar Ali Herischi writes in an opinion piece, "The U.S. must also reform Persian language broadcasting, including Voice of America and Radio Fada, to better reflect American values and interests." On August 15, 2018, Kambiz Mahmoudi, executive editor of VOA Persian from 2004 to 2010, writes in Washington Times, "Using taxpayer money to resurrect and Murray-bound VOA Persian language service would be a big mistake. It will be like pouring good wine into a dirty bottle. Today, the VOA Persian service has lost almost all its credibility. A plan B for the Trump foreign policy team is to support the establishment of a privately funded and operated media company." On January 24, 2018, Ted Lipkin, former VOA acting associate director, in an article in Washington Examiner, writes, "The agency is a national security disaster, requiring a bipartisan fix." On September 18, 2018, in an event in the U.S. Senate, Kareem Sajjadpour, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, blasted VOA Persian service, saying it's currently operating as a 20th century news outlet.
The Voice of America service has the ability, in theory, to reach 40 to 50 million Iranians that have satellite television, but it's a service which has been tremendously underutilized, despite the fact that it has actually sizable resources, perhaps even less resources than some other news networks out of London like BBC Persian or Manitou. It is really underperformed. And I think it's time for someone within the US government, perhaps the US Congress, to actually take some initiative over Voice of America and help it really transition into a 21st century news outlet, because it's currently operating as a 20th century news outlet.
Recently, VOA had a major technical failure which handicapped all its broadcasting for almost 10 days. In the fall of 2017, BBG commissioned a bipartisan report to review the content and performance of VOA Persian. The panelists who reported back to BBG concluded in their report that there were accusations of institutional bias and inaccurate reporting against VOA Persian, but BBG lacks the authoritative mechanism by which to rebut these charges or even to systematically investigate them in a transparent manner. A BBG Viewpoint employee survey shows job satisfaction in VOA Persian at 30% and talent management at 20%. Given all the major controversy around VOA Persian, EmroozNama decided to sit down with a well-known Iranian-American lawyer, Ali Herischi, who has represented a number of VOA Persian employees and contractors in their grievances against VOA and BBG to find out whether the current management of VOA Persian is up to the task and is fit to be put in charge of a new 24/7 Persian language TV channel.
Mr. Herischi, thank you for talking to EmroozNama. You have been dealing with VOA Persian service for many years now. How many cases you have against VOA?
Thank you for having me. I have 4 active cases against VOA. Actually, one of them is pending, but 3 active cases. At the same time, I have multiple contractors that have been retained by our office. However, we did not start the process as of today. The active cases are Mrs. Mahmouni Rahimi against VOA. I have Mr. Ardawan Ruzbe, which has been resolved, and 1 case has been terminated. There is a case between Mrs. Jang Ju against Satara Sej, which is terminated. And I have a case, Mrs. Mahtab Kosari against VOA.
3 out of 4 women. During the management of Mr. Rakhshesh over VOA Persian service, how many female broadcasters have lost their job or left VOA?
I don't know the exact number that how many female has been terminated, but I'm sure I know that the significant number of those who lost their position, contract, or employment with VOA, they were female.
What are the main issues of the female journalist in VOA Persian?
My clients, one of them actually, Mrs. Kosari, is claiming that there is gender bias or gender discrimination for pay. However, I'm aware that there are certain reports that there are issues among women with Mrs. Sej regarding the job opportunities, camera time, and overall growth for women journalists in VOA Persian service.
Does VOA Persian treat its full-time employees and contractors differently?
Definitely. There is, legally there is a huge difference between the contractors and employees. However, in last few months, I would say more than a year, less than 2 years, all these personal service contractors have been moved to a staffing agency, and now they are reporting to, they are employees of a different company but doing exactly the same job as before for the same position as before. And they have the less protection even as a contractor of the government, because now they are dealing with a private sector employee. And therefore the situation stays the same, and they have less protection under the law, doing the same job duties, and have less benefits from the government.
What is the overall level of job satisfaction among VOA Persian employees?
It's really low. Actually, the last survey that the result is publicly published, it is a 2015 survey has been done by Office of Personnel Management. I want to bring your viewers' attention to certain finding of that report, because it speaks for itself. It is actually, this survey has been done among only the government government employees, not the contractors. So they are even the better employees in a way that they have a better condition, and their job situation is not as bad as the contractors. And interestingly, I have to say that 60% of these PNN federal employees believe that arbitrary action, personal favoritism, and coercion for partisan political purposes are tolerated at PNN. 60%. And only 29% of all the employees surveyed believe that these practices, as I mentioned, coercion, personal favoritism, and partisan political purposes, are tolerated, are not tolerated. Only 29%. This is the breakdown of what is happening in VOA Persian service, that it is known to majority of employees that favoritism is the rule. There is another number which is interesting. 58% of PNN employees believe that job promotions are not based on merits. So they can do whatever they want to do, perform good or not perform good. The promotions are not based on what they did. And I mean, that's just a glance of what is happening. I will provide you with the documents to share with your viewers that the result of the management, how destroyed the moral motivation and dignity of the people who worked at VOA Persian Service.
And when that survey take place?
2015.
2015. There are reports of hostile work environment for those who have previously filed complaints.
Yes, I mean, I'm aware of certain cases that now the union, government union that represent VOA employees at the moment taking action against VOA because those who have raised their concern, raised their voice in different meetings, in public meetings that they had with the upper management, they are all have been somehow removed from their previous work functions and have been moved to even different floor to do tasks that are unrelated to their professional and previous backgrounds. They do just translations or do audio dubbing, and they are not, they call it revisionist, I guess revision section. The point is, that's one group, but there are always, in last at least 4 or 5 years that I'm directly involved with VOA Persian service, whoever work or talk against the management, they saw the result by demotion, termination, and basically they lost their official position to a certain degree just because they raised their voices or concerns against the management.
And could you give us some name about the people which you described?
Yeah, for example, one of my clients, Mrs. Kosari, when she raised concern about her rate of pay for doing exact same job as her male counterpart, what happened is the management just decided to terminate her, but they are not going to tell you that we are going to terminate you. They are creating an environment by which you start failing your deadlines, failing your obligation, and they find an excuse to terminate, which is completely the norm there. I mean, they know what they have to do and what they should not to do, and that's why they find a reason. To find a reason, they create a hostile work environment by give the employees or contractor arbitrary work schedule and work duties, and as a consequence, those contractors or employees fail to function under that tough and unreasonable work order, and as a consequence, they find the excuse to terminate or do not extend the contract or do certain grievances against the employees.
Tell me about the case you have against Setare Derakhshesh, chief of the VOA Persian service.
So we have a case against Mrs. Derakhshesh by Sohaila Jangju. The reason for that lawsuit was that we claimed that Mrs. Derakhshesh violated my client's First Amendment rights by terminating her agreement because she has signed a petition to reinstate Mr. State Mike Pompeo to his show, Ufuk Show. So the story is that my client signed a petition, online petition, at the time that Mr. Dekhanpur has been removed from the show. As a consequence of that action, Mrs. Derakhshesh had a conversation with my clients and mentioned that she is, Mrs. Siege is basically disappointed that Mrs. Jangju signed that online petition, and basically she betrayed her by signing such a petition. And at the same time, told her that she is going to reduce her assignments or basically the amount of the contract. At the same time, I was representing Mr. Dehqanpur, and we have, I was aware completely about that petition that has been signed and sent to the Broadcasting Board of Governors board members, because there were about 30 people, 30 prominent Iranian figures who write a petition and write a letter to the upper management and ask for reinstatement of Mr. Dehqanpur, who was the host of the show Horizon or Ufaq, and he was penalized for 10 days from the show because she was not following the order of the management. However, after that 10 days, he was not granted any access to the show. He was not doing any other show. And he is a person who has been in front of camera for 13 years and winning multiple awards in the last 13 years. As a senior broadcaster, he is sitting in his desk and doing translations. This is the great waste of resources for the VOA Persian service. When you have a celebrity anchor and that person is conducting his work perfectly and has an audience, you are destroying that show for personal reasons. I had asked that question from Mrs. Sig in the position that when was the last time we talked to Mr. Dehqanpur? She could not remember in the last 2 years when she talked to Mr. Dehqanpur. And Mr. Dehqanpur is a senior broadcaster, senior employee of that organization. How come the director had no conversation with Mr. Dehqanpur? This is the personally motivated behavior by the director or the upper management. If it was unbiased and objective, it shouldn't be like that. A person could get demoted or get penalized for whatever for 10 days. He has to come back to the show. Why we should destroy the resources and the asset of a television, which is its audience, just for personal reasons. However, during the course of this dedication, we realized that Mrs. Sig claimed part of our discovery process while we were sitting in the position, and she's supposed to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, mentioned that she has no knowledge of that petition prior to the lawsuit. However, we know that she had conversation with BBG's board members, and at the same time she even called one of those people who signed the petition after she realized that he signed the petition, and again convey his disapproval of that action. She lied again. There are so many, unfortunately, Mrs. Sig, during this course of discovery, I realized that she is acting completely against rule of ethics, despite the fact that she is claiming to be a journalist. She is still conducting journalist tasks, such as conducting interviews for VOA Persian service. However, even when she was questioned, first of all, let me give you an example. As a director, she had 2 programs to promote her father, Dr. Muhammad Darakhshesh.
Interview with Mehdi Felahati.
Interviews with Mr. Mehdi Felahati. She stated wrong information about her family, about her father, about her sisters and brothers. And when I asked him about those questions, so you basically provide this information publicly, and I knew those information were not correct. And she stated again under oath that she has no sister or brother from other, half sister or half brother, because her father had 2 wives. And this is the clear evidence of someone to be dishonest and in violation. Because when you're asked and providing wrong information to your audience, as a director of the Persian VOA service, this is the culture. You are opening the door to providing wrong and falsified information to the audience. And she did that. She, for example, asked Mrs. Jangju to manage her personal Facebook page. And for one incident that she worked from home, and that agreement between Mrs. Darakhshesh and Mrs. Jangju was not under Mrs. Jangru's contract, she was doing it as a favor to the manager. And then she realized that, okay, if you're working from home and helping me for this urgent news that I have to put in my Facebook, I'm going to pay you. And they changed basically the invoices, not the invoice. And she got paid for one day that it was not part of her contract. This is the clear violation of, FAR, which is governing the government contractors. So basically, my client received payment for something that Mrs. Sage, just for her own benefits, authorized. The list is long, but the point is, when the top management providing and authorizing this type of behavior, this is the culture that they are providing like a sample or creating what is the standard. If the upper management lies, they can lie. If they change the fact, they can change the fact. And that's obvious. For example, I'll give you another result, another example. There is one article that has been published in Breitbart. And these are, I have to say that VOA never, before 2016 election, ever translated any documents from Breitbart. After election, due to the change of politics, they start translating articles from Breitbart. That's one thing, that's fine. However, this is the article from Breitbart, which covering one event in Washington, D.C., which one Senator Lieberman, and one general discussed the future of Iran and whatever. I mean, they had a panel. And at the end of the article, when the whole reporting of the event is finished, they had a side interview with one audience member, which is Mr. Tanter. Mr. Tanter has his own opinion, which is the future of Iran is by MEK or Mujahideen Khalq, which is fine. That's her opinion, his opinion. However, when they translated these documents, the way that they did it is that there is no reference to those senators. And if you read it, you think that, okay, Mr. Tanter was the panelist, and that was the only matter that has been discussed based on his opinion, which is completely fake news. This has not happened. And this is only to show that they are not following simple and most fundamental journalist ethics rule, that you have to report the truth. You cannot just falsify the articles to your benefit to show that if you have, even if the VOA has political biases, they should not do this. But they claim that they should be neutral, and this is clear violation of their editorial policy.
How successful have you been with the legal cases where you oppose VOA Persian?
One case that we had against Mrs. Darakhshash, due to two matters, the case has been dismissed to the benefit of Mrs. Darakhshash. One is the law has changed, and the scope, the law that we used has been limited for the case that I used that law for. At the same time, Mrs. Darakhshash provided false information, hide the truth, and I'm still hoping to be able to find rebutting facts to help that case. Otherwise, the rest of the cases are still active, and we are going forward.
Let me ask you this. How many lawyers are handling VOA Persian legal cases?
Broadcasting Board of Governors, BBG, has its own legal department. There are many lawyers working for that department to take care of the legal matters for that office. At the same time, Department of Justice is defending BBG in federal courts. So basically, unlimited resources available to Voice of America Persian Service to defend management's action. How many hours they spend? At least if I spend 1 hour, they spend 5 hours. And it's not a fair or equal fight that we are fighting, but at the same time, that's a process, and I'm happy that I took those cases, because what is important is not, of course, resources are going to have certain effects, but at the same time, I'm trying to be the voice of those that otherwise had no voice, and hopefully we get to some justice at the end of these processes.
Are you aware of any government investigation of VOA?
There are certain overall BBG investigation by the Office of Inspector General, and there are some internal investigation as well. I'm not sure about all of them, but for example, one of them that I have the record of, actually, I can share with your audience. This is the report by State Department done in June of 2014, the report. And I'm just going to mention the findings of this investigation. They are, for example, they are saying that contractor responsibility determination did not comply with the federal acquisition regulation. Basically, what they are saying is, as we discussed, the contract and the responsibilities assigned for each contract is against the law, the way that they are doing it. They are saying contract administration practices did not comply with the federal acquisition regulation. Again, they are saying that the way that they assign contracts and promote or give and terminate or extend contracts against the law. They're saying that, for example, contracting officers and contracting officers representatives did not receive required training. Again, those who are managing the contractors, they are not trained enough to understand this condition. This is the wild West practices that they are doing in VOA Persian service, and it is well known. Everyone knows about it. It's not hard to find. I can debate and provide cases after cases after cases that what happened in VOA, and I'm sure that they have no defense, because even the BBG itself have a report in 2014 and 2013 that they are mentioning that their practices of contracting these jobs to just personal service providers are in violation of law, in violation of IRS, in violation of labor law, and in violation of overall government contracting, because they are not authorized to hire these personal service providers to doing what they were doing at the VOA Persian service.
In comparison to other networks like the BBC Persian or Manoto or others, how effective is VOA Persian inside Iran?
No one knows the exact basically effectiveness of VOA Persian service. However, based on the latest polls that they did and other information that is available, and what you see in media, social media, unfortunately, VOA Persian service, which used to be at least number 2 among news television programs, have reduced its credibility by being biased, by having bad quality programs, to something irrelevant. In a way that there is nothing of VOA Persian service that start the discourse, provide as the media related to US government, they are confused to promote the policy of the United States against Iran as the main source that it should be to promote US policies against Iran. They were not successful to providing that. Other news agencies are doing better job than VOA Persian service. And unfortunately, at the end, other than maybe one program, there is no major successful show that they are running at this time. That this budget is basically to waste at this moment.
Do you think VOA Persian is upholding its charter?
I mean, we have to look at what is Voice of America policy. Overall, BBG policy is the news has to be unbiased. The news has to covering U.S. policies and promoting U.S. Democratic values around the world. Unfortunately, despite the title of each program, and if you look at the charts and Excel sheets, you will find so many hours dedicated to certain values of democratic values to be broadcast to Iran. The result is not effective. They're wasting those money and airtime to promoting those values. In my opinion, they're not doing a good job, and at the same time, they are not compliant with overall BBG's policy because they are biased. They are failure in promoting U.S. values in Iran. And unfortunately, especially because the way that they are conducting their news, it's completely obvious for the viewers that it is biased and lacking journalistic rule and standard in those news.
Is there any evidence to say VOA Persian was biased during the US 2016 election? Is it biased today?
Unfortunately, they are looking at this television in a way that they have to comply with the US policies, but this compliance has been translated to biased. So before the election, they thought Obama foreign policy going to be continued by Hillary Clinton. And they were so ready to have Hillary Clinton as the president. Therefore, they prepared everything for her to be the next boss, basically, and they would secure their position at VOA Persian service and VOA General. However, as we know, at the time of election, the result was not something that they were predicted. So they were caught off hand in a way that they had nothing prepared for Mr. Trump's speech, or that the whole night has been completely disaster for VOA. And based on what I heard from Mrs. Sear, there was an order from the upper management that they have to leave. Basically, they stopped broadcasting live programming at the night of election. And now, and after that, because they were worried that, they are not going to be considered Democrat, they start to step 10 steps ahead of the U.S. policy and the administration to promote their foreign policy. But the point is, the viewer will understand. One day you are having different policy, the other day you have different policies. Sometimes you promote certain guests and certain values, and the next day you are promoting different guests and different policies. So it's obvious, and that's why people stop watching it, because they know that this is not a true and unbiased news. It's just a sort of propaganda without any merits to those news that they are provided by VOA Persian.
Do you think U.S. Congress is aware of the issues in VOA Persian?
I'm aware that they are at least receiving certain reports from employees, from those politically active members of the society. However, I'm not sure how those reports are biased, whether they are really good, unbiased reports, or each of these groups who are either promoted or not promoted, they are just, discussing their point of view with Congress. I'm sure that they are not a major communication between Iranian community with VOA board of directors or congressmen or overall policymakers regarding the result and or feedback of VOA Persian service.
What can viewers do to make VOA Persian service work for them?
I think they should communicate their concerns with their...
To who?
Those who are living in the United States. This is the government agency. This is the taxpayer-supported program. And they have to discuss their concerns with their representative in House or in the Senate. They have to call, they have to mention that they need a better programming. They need their political view to be reflected in this program. They need, most importantly, they have to ask for something to represent the United States as a matter of quality, as a matter of unbiased media, as a matter of democratic values, this is not a true representation of the United States. This is whatever is bad about U.S. is what they are doing right now at the VOA Persian service. There is biased, they are politically motivated, and they're not doing something that is in accordance with journalistic ethical rules.
As you know, the State Department has announced that in a few months, VOA Persian is going to be a 24/7 media network. Do you think it's going to be successful?
Unfortunately, what we heard from head of Broadcasting Board of Governors about the news that the current management of VOA going to continue and be responsible for this 24/7 programming. If what we get right now is a good indication of what we are going to get in the future with the expansion, unfortunately the outcome would not be good, and it's a waste of money and time. If they want to do really a good job, they have to rethink their priorities and make sure the new rules and new methods of management, policy making, and monitoring be imposed to VOA Persian service. With current system of governance, whatever it is, unfortunately, it is not the place to grow. It is not going to accomplish any objectives if the objective is to provide something better and more effective to Iranian community. Unfortunately, the current management shows no respect to the BBG's policy, to the government policy, and they are just politically biased individual that they are working for their own interest against Iranian interest, against U.S. public policy interest. And I would be glad to take them on this accusation that I made right now in open public forum. However, if someone is asking, I can provide you. There are so many suggestions right now that how we can make VOA Persian service better by providing different mechanism to review the material, make sure the material is unbiased by third party, unbiased body. But there are ways to do it, and I hope that they consider other ways than just expanding what they are doing right now.
Mr. Herischi, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Sure, thank you so much.